It's not live yet. Yes, now
Hello,
it's.
everyone. We're on, and my team is already talking. Thank you very much for showing your pretty faces here as our audience. We're today not streaming on Facebook. Sometimes technical issues emerge. Andrew is not here. Andrew was sick over the last week or two, so I'm not sure whether he's coming or not. But we have the youth here. One student and lecturer, and the other person who has done it, forgot it, and will tell you about his experiences. Andrew is here. Beautiful.
Oh, there he is.
Wow,
Wow.
Hey.
we've got the whole span of the history of the field. Okay, my friends. So today we will talk. I didn't yet share the screen. But the job that we're having today is to talk about crafting a compelling PhD research proposal. Now, before we actually go into the mathematics of it, I want to first, and sorry, my friends, first I will ask Andrew to tell us something because there are different traditions, different systems. So Andrew has worked in Thailand for the last more than 10 years. So, Andrew, can you tell us a little bit how is drafting a PhD proposal an issue in Thailand? And if it is, when does it emerge? Because it's different in Australia.
Okay, well, first of all, hello, and I'm here. I made it. Can you hear me? I guess you can hear me.
Yes, we
okay.
can.
Okay, so there are. I don't think that there is a special. Well, I guess if every country has its own traditions, I think that the Thai system is based on the American system. The American system requires coursework and a thesis, and it requires success in both.
Yeah.
And it's based on the idea that you have to have some basic knowledge before you can move on to the thesis itself, although the dissertation is the main focus of the whole thing. Now, in Australia, in Britain, maybe in New Zealand, I'm not sure, it may have changed, but it used to be part of the same system. Everything is done with a thesis, and any training that is required is managed by the student as they engage with the project. And so, in a sense, it's much more focused in the Australian system. It's much more focused on the actual topic that the student has decided to study. There are
I didn't understand. I didn't understand. Sorry, Andrew, I didn't understand. So we have a situation in
What
Australia.
exactly?
In Australia, the system is that a student in Indonesia may or may not have a scholarship and wants to do PhD with someone, right? So they
Yes.
have to. So that's, and what you're saying is in that system, in Australian system, what does happen?
In the Australian system, there is no coursework for the PhD. Sometimes, if you're doing what's called a professional doctorate, like an Ed.D., in some universities, I don't know what it's like I think it varies from place to place. You do have to do some coursework, and you do a kind of minor thesis or replace a thesis with something else. However, in the general run of PhDs, you select a supervisor, you negotiate the topic with the supervisor, there is a proposal done that the university approves, and you go and you study basically on your own all the time. There is no coursework in the Australian system or the British system. Some people say that's not good because you don't have basic knowledge, like you may not have basic knowledge in, I don't know, second language acquisition, question is, would you want to have the basic knowledge in second language acquisition or whatever? I see, you can see my Winnie the Pooh there in the background. Maybe I'll blur it in a minute. No, that's the other thing. So, I mean, would you want to do that? And what happens is that people actually don't suffer because of this terrible lack of knowledge, because they get it along the way with their supervisor, and quite often in the Australian system and in the British system and so on, there are people that you can turn to for help. So if you need help with statistics, I remember at the University of Canberra at some stage, I don't know if that still exists, there used to be somebody in statistics that you could go and get help from. So all of those things get evened out over time. It doesn't matter whether you. And the reality is that if you do a course in quantitative theory in the first part of the doctoral program, the reality is that most people forget about it. And if you ask them in their second year, what do you remember about quantitative analysis? They'll say, it's about numbers. Now, it's not quite as bad as that, but people have been taught stereotypes such as quantitative analysis is about numbers, qualitative analysis is about words. Right? That's what they seem to remember. And then they finish up with quantitative analysis is objective, qualitative analysis is subjective. And so they remember these things in their heads in all of their research careers, instead of actually thinking about it and working out that none of it is objective and everything is actually based on the ways people think out these areas. Now, it's convenient to have numbers and it's convenient to have tests, but if the tests and the numbers actually are not thought out in a way which is appropriate or correct, I don't know, I don't want to use the word correct, but we have to, I think. Then there's a big problem, even if the numbers say something. So the numbers have to be based on something, and the something must be validated, and the something must be reliable, as people say. And in qualitative analysis, it's all different. And people say you can't have qualitative analysis which is quantitative because of whatever. The problem is nowadays, of course, with ChatGPT and so on, you can actually feed ChatGPT huge amounts of qualitative information and get quantitative and qualitative analysis out of that data. Because what happens is you feed it the information and then it categorizes it in certain ways. You might want it to be thematic, or you might want to be componential, or whatever it is that you want to do. And so now with ChatGPT, we can actually conflate qualitative and quantitative, because to be quite perfectly honest, qualitative analysis of 10 people in your university or your school is irrelevant in the overall scheme of things. I mean, who cares whether your 7 students liked something or didn't like it? What we need to know is this thing going to be of value beyond your school or beyond your place? And that's one of the problems, of course, with case studies and with action research. People say, oh, we have to do action research. Okay, well, let's do action research. Well, we discovered that at, Nakhon Ratchasima Primary School, grade 2 in year 2024, this thing happened. Okay, and where does this go? I mean, who cares? So what? That's the other thing. The other thing I wanted to say is that there are actually different traditions of PhDs. Some of them are very heavily data-driven. So in America, in particular, you've got to have data. In fact, in the Thai context, when people say research, they mean something with data. They don't care about your thinking or about your intellectual frameworks or whatever it is. They want some data, and it can be numerical or it can be qualitative and so on, but they want data. If it doesn't have data, it's not research, which is kind of interesting because especially in the European context, you can have PhD theses which are entirely philosophical, like Anya's thesis, or like Harold Krause's thesis. These theses are very important because they set the intellectual groundwork for other stuff which may or may not have data. But examiners don't like it. So, for example, one of the examiners for one of my students who did a theoretical thesis said, well, a PhD is a genre. It has to have a certain structure. And so in Thailand, particularly, but not particularly just Thailand, but in general, how many chapters do we have in a thesis? 6. What are they? Introduction. What's the other one? Literature review, methodology, findings, discussion, conclusion. And there you have it. There's your PhD. And so if you want to have a stunning PhD or whatever, a really important, I forget what word did you use, Anya? You used a good word. Compelling. If you want to have a compelling project, then you have to ask, what is that? And then each university has to decide whether the PhD projects that it approves are actually sufficiently compelling. Because there may be a contrast between, for example, go.
You finish and then I'll.
Hello.
You finish and I'll then speed up.
Okay. For example, okay. Then I think of Lara Boroditsky's work with how language works and how language influences thought is very different from somebody doing does gamification increases your control of pronouns or prepositions in English. I mean, these are two they're quantum difference apart from each other. They are hugely different. And going back to some of the other Boroditsky or related stuff, apparently if people in certain cultures speak about the future, they lean forward. And if they talk about the past, they lean backwards.
And in other cultures,
these are very important.
And in other cultures, it's opposite.
And other cultures are opposite. Yes. And other cultures, it's opposite. And so you finish up with everybody gets a PhD, and everybody has a PhD which is approved by some general world authority. Okay, so the SUT PhD is a real PhD and has the stamp of approval from some organization internationally, and then the CDU PhD is the same, and the PhD at Stanford and at Harvard are the same. But actually, when you look at the content of these things, they are all very different from each other. And you need to, and there seems to me to be a need for organizations and universities to find a way of relating these different levels to one another, because they are quite different. And the impact that these things have are also quite different. So what I say to my students, two things generally. Is one, first of all, get something that will excite you and that will make it worth your while to wake up every morning for the next 2 or 3 years. And secondly, do something that is actually valuable. Right? So as a counterexample, people know very well what they can finish quickly. Because a lot of people do PhDs because they want to get a better job, a better life. And 80% of the people who do PhDs in my environment, at least, come to Thailand, do a PhD, get the stamp on their academic thing, go back home and never do anything else again. And 20% go home and say, oh, wow, this is really good. We're going to do this and this and this and this, and I'm going to publish this and I'm going to publish that and I'm going to publish that. And so those who come just to get a PhD to get a better job, which, by the way, is what I tried to do a long time ago. That was one of my motivations. I wanted to have a PhD in order to get a better job, was to find stuff that is doable. So, for example, in our school, or in our area, the school that I work in now, but in other schools as well, people say, oh, if I do a textual analysis using systemic functional linguistics or what's his name, Highland's work, then I can do this in 3 months and then go home. If I do an experimental study, it's going to take me at least 6 or 8 months. And then I have to write the thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they balance things out. Which one am I going to do? Something which is perhaps impressive but takes 3 years, or something I can do in 1.5 years? Oh, okay, I'll do the one which can be done in 1.5 years. I'll go back home. I'll get married, have children, and my life will be set. And I say this just to set the scene for today's conversation.
And we will come back to the thoughts that you have actually raised, which is contributing to knowledge. That's important. What else was there? Contributing to knowledge and doing something that actually matters to you. And I can't remember what other point would you mention?
Well, nothing. I talked about excitement, which is about what.
But I wanted to also raise something else, because we actually
people have to be excited about their work and want to do it.
We actually might be talking past each other. There are two types of proposals, darlings, when you actually want to do a PhD. It's the initial proposal you send to Anya Lyon or to Professor Lyon or to Dr. Sudamantirav in Lala Bumela. Anyway, he doesn't even know he had a surname until he had to finish his PhD. There's just cultural differences. Anyway, so it's the first proposal. So as Andrew mentioned, in Australia...
Can I just say something? I'm about to change servers here, so I may get disconnected. Please reconnect me when you see me.
Okay. So in Australia, and so if you want to do a PhD, say in a country like Australia, where, as Andrew mentioned, the PhD is not by coursework. By the time you actually do your PhD, it is assumed you've done your master's or some other fourth-year postgraduate degree that gives you some research skills. So you are expected to contact your supervisor with some preliminary proposal. That proposal is short, it's not bounding, but very often the person you contact may not know that you are not so much committed to that specific proposal. So they will read your text and they will say, no, this is not within my area of interest, not today, and they will reject you, although they could supervise something else that you're interested in, but you didn't signal it. So I think that the first thing, and that's why I asked Andrew how it is in countries which actually have coursework, so I don't know. But in Australia, once you contact me, you should contact your supervisor, and you should contact many supervisors, because in Australia, scholarship, if you don't have a scholarship, you should contact many supervisors, potential supervisors. And you indicate your general area of interest so that you do not block opportunities for yourself. Myself, I have supervised studies, which, Amy is in early childhood. Lala is nowhere near early childhood, like he's doing academic study. I have students who are doing also leadership PhDs with me, either they finish or they're still doing this. Other students are doing how to reshape the landscape of education, say in Australia, we have particular illnesses here, so how to deal with that. So you can see I have quite a broad spectrum, and everybody who works in education should have a broad spectrum. And we need research students who will do that work for which we may not have all the time, because early childhood research may contribute to something that I do in literacy, even though I work maybe with older children or older students. So anyway, so in Australia, if you want to do a PhD, you must contact a supervisor, potential supervisor, and submit this initial proposal. I just wanted you to see some things. So in Australia, what's needed is something like anything from 500 to 800 words, where you identify the problem that you would like to investigate. This is really critical, what the problem is, to state it. Every supervisor looks at it. I myself will look at the context where the study will take place. Is it in Indonesia? Is it in Thailand? Is it going to be in Australia? So relevant policies. It's very important to mention policies. So if you do a study in Vietnam, and I have no idea about Vietnam, and you tell me that you're interested about children singing every day, I have no idea where to stick it. Right? But so if you give me a pretty good statement about how this particular idea relates or doesn't to policies. It doesn't have to relate to policies. It may actually be against the policies, and that's fine too. That's what research is. Research is not towing the line. It's about identifying new things and contributing to knowledge. And sometimes that study might actually go against policies. But I need some information about the context. Now, there's another thing. Today, I will take you through some things later on or soon to show you that we are very, very weak in those proposals and in our publications with identifying tensions, intellectual tensions in our field. So when you write your initial proposal, there's 700 words that I am to read to see whether I want to take you on and support your application. It is really helpful. You don't have to identify them well in that initial proposal when you are telling me your name and that you want to study with me. You don't have to do it well. But if you know that that's the thing you need to look for as you write proposal or later on as you study with your supervisor, it's extremely important, because contributing to knowledge is about either highlighting this tension even more or solving the tension or reducing the tension, right? That's what contributing to knowledge is. If you argue with your friend, you contribute to your context together by resolving that tension one way or another. And the same with disciplines. And then as a result, which aspect of this tension you will focus on. These are the elements that make up the structure of the proposal. Now, in general, how is all of this to contribute to knowledge, which means to that tension, right? To resolving this tension. That's what AIMS is. AIMS is your articulation with a few more words about how your study is to actually address the tension and as a result help the bigger picture. Research questions today, they're very easy. I'm not going to hide it. I'm very bad with research questions. Totally. I've always been bad. So today I just take the proposal, submit it to ChatGPT and ask it to suggest some. And then I can tweak it myself. But it's good to have another source or another partner to communicate with, to help me to see how someone else, like ChatGPT, would be a good way to phrase these or identify those questions. So very often these research questions will address policies, obviously, will address intellectual scope, how your study is going to shift the intellect, contribute, broaden it, shift, make it, bring a change into how we understand things, or add to it, or how your study might actually change the way we do research or research a particular thing. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this in this way, we should be doing something in a very different way. So that's sort of these things. And then you basically state what Andrew was talking about, the methodology of your study. That's a complex thing, but in that initial proposal, you just basically say whether it's going to be qualitative, quantitative, mix. I wrote mixed methods because that's the cleanest way, I think. It could be a theoretical study, which is a desktop study. I did that. Yes, so I didn't start my PhD with an introduction. I wrote an essay. I had it. I didn't know what it just came out of me. I just had to do it, right? So I did that, and I had a supervisor who was very happy with it. He just wanted me to finish. He didn't care anymore what I'm doing with it. So that was my sort of. So you can do either mixed methods or whatever. So you specify that more or less you think that your study will follow this. You can specify also where the study will take place, whether you will work with university students, locality, what will be your participants, who will be your participants, and in what country. So as much as possible. It's very good to also indicate a little bit your literature scope in that initial proposal. It's not a must, but inserting bibliography would be a good thing. Also references. I cannot stress enough that even that initial proposal cannot be a plagiarism. And my students or my future potential students may think, well, it's not a plagiarism, it's just we just wrote the text. Every time you write the text and you don't reference, it's either made up story that holds no water, or it's plagiarized from somewhere. Not that necessarily the words are copied and pasted, but the ideas are not referenced. And if you do not reference ideas, how do you know that something like a policy of this and this kind exists, or this and this approach, or this and this practice exists, right? You have to reference. So it's called in-text citations, inside of the text. And I'm stressing it because I'm having a battle at the master level in our university with students, continuously reminding them, please do it, because they just forget it. Okay, so that's the initial proposal. Lala, your initial proposal to me was quite a fully fledged proposal, right? It had, head and arms and legs and everything. Not every proposal looks like that. So, did you get a scholarship in Indonesia on the basis of your
Own
merits,
proposal.
grades, or the proposal as well?
Yes, I think they took everything into account. They examined how I went in my university, in my undergrad, in my bachelor degree, and also with the proposal. But I was aware that there are a lot of weaknesses in terms of context and policies on here, because you showed me that it is very important for me to align the research with the policy, and I was not totally aware with that. And I think you and Andrew Lyon also showed me that contributing to the existing knowledge also mattered. That's also, I think, my second weakness says that I had in my proposal. And when I wrote the proposal, I mean, yes, in terms of structure, I was happy, but in terms of how I actually explored my knowledge, I was not that happy, because when I came to CDU, I became aware that there is a changing shape of knowledge in language education, right? And then I also attempted to define the value of of language education in the context of 21st century learning, in the context of digitalization, in the context of globalization. So after sending you that proposal, two things actually popped up in my mind. So I asked myself whether my research proposal, my research project, could be the new engine of innovation in my department, and then whether or not it will be the catalyst for sustainability. And when I was trying to explore for more and more references on policy, I think I was doing the right thing when you told me that we have to shift away from the existing curricula. I mean, the genre-based approach into the multisensorial load reduction strategies. It means that we are trying to innovate the landscape of English language education in Indonesia, and that is actually a key component of sustainability. So I think yes, that's the first lesson I learned. Yeah, and I was very
But
happy that I
because
sent you the proposal.
but that's
Yeah,
because I didn't ask you to do something. That's because we looked at what I call
right.
here under research questions or even contribution to knowledge,
Yeah,
the intellectual scope. We broadened the intellectual scope and we learned more. And
right.
therefore, we were able as a result to reveal tensions
Yeah,
in
yeah,
mainstream system in Indonesia or
mm,
even in Australia, right?
mm,
So new literature enabled us, but that's in the later on. So first you
right,
had the proposal and it showed scholarship, it showed
mm,
involvement with the literature, and that was good enough. So, someone like if you're sending to someone your first proposal, which is, remember, it's no more than 500 700 words, so it's not your life's book,
yeah,
right? It's just something to give hint to a prospective supervisor what your interest is.
mm,
Amy, you did differently in that initial proposal to just get a tick and
mm,
just wait, don't answer yet. To get a tick and to get the admission to university. So basically, my university has a policy where key supervisors were asked to put something on CDU website, like projects that students could do. And I knew that Emmy was going, say, towards something, but for the sake of just getting the admission, I said, Emmy, take that thing which is on the website, get admitted, and then because what happens in Australia and I think in Anglo-Saxon countries is that you submit this first thing. Now I knew Emmy. I've known Emmy for like 11 years, right? 11, 12 years. So I have already rapport. I know exactly what's in her head. I know Emmy. So it's different than someone coming that I don't know. But anyway, I said just submit it for the sake of formality, and then we will. And then in Australia, what you have to do, you are given, say, from 6 months to 8 months, up to a year. The Australian systems give you this time to now polish your proposal, which is something that Andrew was talking about, right? So now it's serious. You have to do research, you have to focus the problem, and that's where Amy is. Amy
Mm-hmm.
didn't like my idea of just lifting from the website the ready proposal and then change it later on. Amy wanted from the beginning to have. Why, Amy? Why did you want from the beginning to have the right focus?
Because I wanted to be excited about it, like Andrew said. I wanted to wake up every day ready, passionate and excited about my topic and what I was. I know that it wasn't set in stone, but I wanted to be happy with it. I wanted to align with it even in a basic sense. And that it's true that has changed a lot since that initial proposal. Like you say, Anya, it's just a beginning articulation, I guess you could say, of your interests. But I just had to have something that was true to my heart.
Yeah, so now you are struggling, and Andrew was saying something like, um,
Because
and
I'm trying to do the second part. I'm trying to make it valuable.
so you are now in that period where university gives you up to a year to write
Yes.
the real thing with 7,000 words approximately, right? And
Yeah.
your supervisor tells you write more because those pages will contribute to your thesis, as Lala
Yeah.
will and his colleagues will say. What I do with students, then once the student passes this formal proposal, which is the confirmation of candidature, then
Mm-hmm.
I sit down with the student and we divide the proposal into 3 chapters, and these are the core. That the proposal becomes the core of the first 3 chapters, and that's very handy because then student just can do a few more things, and then basically you begin your real study with 3 chapters written, which is quite.
Mm.
This is actually the recipe behind why all my students submit on time, because we write seriously from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not doing exactly what kind of like system wise is expected that Andrew mentioned. System
Mm-hmm.
wise is expected that you work more or less on your own within that year, and you see your supervisor rarely.
Mm.
So that's not happening, because if you want to contribute to knowledge, and if you want to identify the tensions, and if you want to check the intellectual scope alone, it'd be very hard. It's like talking
Mhm.
to the wall, right? There's no
It is.
feedback.
It is. Yeah, that's right. There's lots of, like we talked about last podcast, there's sort of misconceptions that you come in with, and, sort of inexperience in general, that you can just run yourself around in little circles like a dog chasing your tail. And I think that would happen to most people, especially when they come in with some sort of loose ideas around what they want to do, and then they spend a year writing about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely important.
So we've talked about it last time. So we're not gonna just wanted to just comment that changing the landscape or contribute to knowledge is not an easy task, right? So
Mm-mm.
it's. I wanted to take you now a little bit through. I wanted to take you through the process of identifying how to write a proposal, that initial proposal, not necessarily the one that you will then work on with your supervisor and you will have to defend in order to be confirmed PhD candidate. I'm talking about the one about 700 words that you write. So
Mhm.
one thing that maybe I have mentioned before, do contact your prospective supervisor and just, or maybe just check a little bit what they research, what their main area of interest is, so that you don't send me a proposal on mathematics, right? Something like totally outside of my scope. But so I thought to myself, one way to do it is to actually look at abstracts and also papers. You can read the paper, but I just looked at 3 or 4 abstracts for today for us to think a little bit how an abstract alone, and then maybe later on the paper on that this abstract discusses, how it can actually help us in identifying the tensions, and how, so that we can then identify what we would like to study, and we can actually construct a proposal. I have to say that I'm very critical of other people always. I usually, as an editor, or reviewer, I accept most papers. But the reason I accept most papers, because I find a lot of papers which are already published are quite weak. I find them weak. But let's have a look. So here we have a paper that was just published in the Australian Journal of Language and Literacy. And it begins with something like literacy is now an essential part of teaching for Indonesian teachers. I'm not quite sure in what context we are sitting. Is it English, or is it Indonesian language, or is it the local languages? You can see how that's not there. Um, but it doesn't matter. Now we know that there must be. We're not even sure whether there's a policy. Is there a policy mentioned? I haven't read it. Can't remember. But anyway, so since when it is an essential part of teaching? There's no policy mentioned, no year. Now I'm pretty good at it. I had Indonesian students. I know exactly the context, so I can straight away. I mean, not just using my own method of critical thinking, but just even based on knowledge that I have, I can see that this is just empty statement, shouldn't be there. So when you write a proposal, you say, since since Indonesia obtained its independent status, education policy started to be framed, and this is what happened, and there was a history of that, and over the last 10 years, or I don't know, 10 years is it, or something like that, these policies are getting increasingly similar to that which is happening in the West, and targeting larger demographics and so on. So do say that. It gives you a paragraph. It gives you a reference, and I know that you are a person with the feet on the ground, rather than someone who says, I'm thinking that knowing how to read is a good thing. This qualitative study reports on on 3 Indonesian teachers. So this is the issue that Andrew was mentioning. Like, it's not groundbreaking. What's the value of that to knowledge, right? So you can think to yourself, okay, so this is what they did. They said that this abstract indicates to me there probably is a policy. They don't mention, right? There's a particular trend. Andrew said 3 people. It's very local. I don't know how to scale it up, how to generalize it. What does it tell us about what's happening in the big world? So that's something that you may want to consider when you write your proposal. So basically, on 3 Indonesian teachers, as they integrate the use of children literature into their literacy instruction. What's missing here? Like, I'm gonna look how they do that. So what's missing? What's the problem? Why are you doing this? What does the policy say? What should happen? What should happen? And now what you want to do is you will look at it from the perspective of what should happen, whether it is happening. Well, that's now having some flesh. So, so you can sort of mimic this thing, but now in an informed way. So for 4 months, this person was looking at what people were doing. Still, I don't know why and with what perspective in mind, or with what objective in mind. It's so fluidy and fluffy. It's basically lacking conceptual framing, which is exactly what we were saying before. We're not sure how it is going to contribute to what knowledge, right? So is it going to contribute to the intellectual scope, to policy, or to the methods of study, or to all of that? So the study uses the readers some sort of framework. We don't know what it is, no referencing, especially the notion of teachers as part of the learning context in promote. Yeah. So the study highlighted some case study teachers' classroom practices. The findings discussion sheds light on some contributing factors to the teacher's decision. Is it a teacher's decision to integrate children's literature, or is it a policy decision? You've got to make up your mind. It's very unclear. So I thought to myself, if I were to write the proposal, I would integrate some of the comments I made now on this abstract, specify the body of specify the policy, specify the intellectual framework that explains the policy. So for example, if Australia wants every child to be critical participant in the Australian society, so what's the intellectual knowledge? Well, basically the intellectual knowledge is that informed if you act informed, you act critically, and you might actually respond even just through voting in a way that reflects your broader understanding of your locality and also the global context, right? So what's the policy? What's the conceptual framing behind those policies that you are aware of? So what's the body of knowledge that the study seeks to contribute to? Would it, will you contribute to policy, to local challenges, intellectual context, understanding of policies? Will you be scoping intellectual basis of the assumptions underpinning literacy pedagogy? So these are the sort of things that might, if present in your proposal, would be helpful. You might examine how an intellectual shift may make a difference. So it's one way of looking at integrating children's literature in order to support the policy. And it could be another way of looking and assessing integrating the use of children's literature to support the policy. So what the contribution to knowledge would be in terms of comparing and contrasting the different intellectual approaches to it, and also the effects that you will be measuring. Does anyone want to comment? And this is not the proposal, the 7,000. This is something like, how do I start? So you open the journal, you look at the proposal, the abstract they have, and then you sort of think to yourself. I haven't shown you the slide. Here it is. My bad. So proposal include the body of knowledge that the study is to contribute policies, local challenges, intellectual context, understanding of policies, examine how different shifts might or might not make a difference, right? So, yeah, that would be a nice way to learn from this abstract and from this study, make it a little bit more fine-tuned for it to be actually appropriate for PhD. And it would be a good first step. Lala, a specialist on Indonesia.
Yeah, I think it's very common for us here, Anya, to simply generate research ideas that way. I mean, if
As in the abstract.
yeah, right, right. And then in terms of the I don't know, curriculum, we never have a special research training on how we can contextualize the research problem or research ideas, and then we are never trained to to create tensions in research, right? So that's what's happening here, and I think that's the biggest missing part in our research training. And then I think Andrew was right, because we have here the American system, right, where we have the coursework and the research units. Normally here in undergrad level, we have 2 or 3 research units which are separate from the main courses. And what happens when they are doing the research proposal, either in the undergrad or in postgraduate level, I mean, this kind of creating tension practices is missing. And that's number one. And number two, there is too much emphasis on the old paradigm. I mean, reader response theory is quite old. And then I know that students' engagement is very interesting, but I guess we have to move beyond what has been discussed for such a long time, and it is very hard really to break away the old paradigm. And I think when we talk about reading for emotion, for instance, we can actually talk about engagement from within, right? Not from the external realities, or not from the external linguistic description. And so I can sense here that there is no aura of changing the knowledge landscape in the field of literacy education here. So that's what I can comment on here, Anya.
That's that journal is a category, what I call quote category Q1 journal, right?
Well,
So it published it and there. All right. So there's another thing I came up
Well,
here.
I
Yeah,
wanted to
and
make a comment on that,
yeah,
I've just checked the journal, and I don't know if it's a Q1, but it's definitely Scopus. You say it's Q1, that puts it at the top of the 25 percentile of journals, and I'm actually surprised they even published this, to be honest. I mean, if somebody sent this to the AsiaCALL online journal, which I have something to do with, I think I would ask myself, well, why publish it? What do we get out of it? And
right. So maybe the paper is better. I don't know, but the abstract was very poor. So I'm not making a judgment on
yeah,
paper, but I'm looking at abstract. And abstracts are important because sometimes on
no,
Facebook
but
I
I'm
find
not. Yeah, I'm not making a judgment on the abstract. I'm making a judgment on the methodology, which is it's qualitative. It's 4 months long. How many students did we have? I can't remember how many students were involved.
no, it's not stated.
It doesn't say how many students were involved, and it's qualitative. And so I think that there are other factors at play, which is that there are fashions of what is acceptable and what is accepted. And one of the fashions at the moment is that qualitative stuff is liked. People like qualitative analyses. And when you think about how qualitative analysis is generally performed, it's very, very worrying. So, for example, you think that qualitative analysis, I think of qualitative analysis as a mountain of data lying on the floor, mountain of data. And I go and I pick it and I organize it into categories. Who does the categorization? Any,
Yeah. How do you do it?
it's
How do
me.
you get the
I
categories?
do it. So, well, it depends. It depends on many things. But a lot of people just do it and say, I think this means that. I think this means that. See, so it's all meaning based and it's culture based. And how do you, there are two factors which are used in qualitative analysis. One is called credibility. Is this organization credible? And the second one is it triangulated? Do other people say the same thing? That's how it works out. How do people say? So people often say at thesis defenses, so did you get somebody else to check your results? And the people said, oh yes, I got some experts to check the result. Okay. Now, who are these experts? Well, usually they're your friends who happen to be in the same university. I mean, you don't go and get your enemies to do the checking, right? You
So
really
research
don't go get your
methodology should
enemies to do,
include the triangulation, and that would be
right.
important. So the way you conceptualize your framework and the way you then, so that's the later
Yeah,
on, but it
but
would
it
be
becomes,
important.
but it's but it's super personal in the sense of, oh yeah, they're Australians, they live in Darwin, and they all work in the education department with me. I mean, to put it as it's just a joke. I mean, I don't necessarily mean that, but it could be, they live in Thailand at Suranari University of Technology in the School of English
So
or
there's this
foreign languages,
uniformity of
whatever we call these
culture.
days.
So there's no
And so everybody says,
credibility in that method.
yeah. And so everybody says, well, do you agree with Andrew? And I say, oh yeah, we agree with Andrew. He said he got it right here. Oh, we don't agree with Andrew here. So when they don't agree with Andrew, what happens? You say, oh well, what do you think it should be? And you say, oh, I think it means this. Oh yeah, let's agree that it means this. So you have a compromise. So you go from a point of principle to a point of compromise. So everything becomes, oh yeah, we agreed that this was like that. Okay, so what? So tomorrow people will think differently, meanings will have moved and changed, and the study will be worthless. And on top of that,
Right.
if you
So
work with translation, if you work, if you do say questionnaires and you have meetings of people, and you have the meetings in Indonesian, but you report it in English, there's a problem because the English doesn't mean the same as the Indonesian. Sometimes it does, maybe mostly it does, but there will be times when it doesn't. So all of these issues about, we've got a study running in Vietnam at the moment, which has had very good quantitative results, and but the examiners at the moment don't worry about the quantitative results; they worry about the qualitative results, right? That we cured the patient, but actually we wanted to know how they felt about it. So how did you feel about the cure? Oh, you felt good? Oh, that's nice. Uh, that's good that you felt good about it. Oh, you didn't like the cure. Did it work? Did the cure work? Yes, it did. Oh, well, but we can't have that because you didn't like it. I mean, come on, guys. Let's fix on what we need to let's focus on what we need to focus on. What is the main game? The main game was to fix, I don't know, voiceless consonants. Did we fix the voiceless consonants? Yes. Was it significantly better than the other approaches? Yes. How do we know that? Well, we had these other measurements which we used. And then we asked the students, did you like it? Oh, it was a bit boring. Yes, but that's the whole point. Because if we make it less boring, we introduce new variables into the structure. So we have to have good tight variable control. Otherwise, we're going to be all over the place, and we'll finish up with, oh yeah, everybody had a really good time. It's like a PTA
so it's
meeting or
supposed to be a
something.
party. Let's have a party and study literacy.
So yeah, or the
Let's
Boy Scouts.
gamify.
We had a Boy Scout meeting. We did really good things like had a bonfire. But
All right. So
what did
that's
we
enough
fix?
of
Oh
this.
well, everybody was happy. Okay, that's good.
Did we learn
You see
anything?
what I'm saying?
We're happy.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. I mean, there's no point in everybody being happy, for example, in a high school or in a school. We were talking with Andrew Martin in Indonesia, and Lala may remember, he was saying, well, there's no point in doing this stuff if kids learn nothing. What's the point of them doing this weird and wonderful stuff if kids learn absolutely nothing? How do you measure them? The learning, of course, is the other issue. So that's discussable.
So let's have a
So
look at
so
something else.
we finished. We Yeah. So I'm just surprised that this actually got published at all.
But that gives us a few clues. I mean, even if a bad abstract, especially bad abstracts, allow us to identify what's missing. And when someone writes a proposal, now they can clearly see what to insert, what mistakes to avoid, and that was the idea behind this analysis. I have another one here. So it is about digital. Look, I didn't really have much patience when, and I'm very sorry that I was a little bit maybe negative towards it. But for me, the first paragraph, the second paragraph, and until we got to the thing that I did, highlighted in red, the same sentence just written over and over and over again. So it's the same issue of the journal. So digital technology has long been ubiquitous in many communities in us. Why don't we just say that Australian curriculum requires this and this and this? These are the policies. Like, I know that it removes the poetry from the language, makes it kind of like, if this, then that, then that, then that. But you only have like 200 words for an abstract. You don't really want to talk about how your mother felt about you using PowerPoint, right? So in educational setting, there's a clear need for teachers. There's no clear need for teachers. There is no need for teachers to do anything. The Australian curriculum mandates that you integrate digital literacy into your teaching. That's finished. There's nothing about what teachers feel. A researcher may comment on it, or a teacher may comment in the context of research and maybe affect policies. But if a policy says to you, you got to teach children digital literacy, you have no say. What are you going to say? I don't feel really good about it. I don't like mathematics. In my mathematics class, I would teach them how to jump, right? Just have no say. So I don't know why we're saying that. The next one, well-established understandings about the importance of literacy development in a child's life support teachers of the first years of school to teach. Like which understandings? Like what aspect of it? We are not precise. Which understandings support teachers for digital literacy? Like which approach, which thinking, what concept? Be a little bit precise. So when you write a proposal to someone like me or anyone from, this is like pouring water, and the surface is very patient, will accept everything. There's the policies, the approach is like this. The intellectual frameworks that support this policy are such as such. However, there are tensions, and where do these tensions come from? Where do they emerge from? Well, maybe there are different traditions. Maybe there are new findings in neuroscience and the brain learning studies. Maybe one framework is old, one framework is, like there could be different approaches that you may want to look at the way how digital literacy is to be supported, just none of that is just okay. So now we have new literacy theories. So there are many theories of new literacies. Like I thought there was only one. I thought it was just Mary Kalantzis and the genre approach, but now we have many theories. So again, you can't grab it. It's foggy. It's always escaping me. Every paragraph escapes me. I don't know where I'm standing. So, when you write your proposal, grab it, commit to it. And like Lala, change your mind once you see my pretty face, right? But commit to something so we can understand where you come from and where. And so maybe you believe in one, but you want to do something. So you think that one will take you to something. And then I can have a discussion with you that maybe one will not take you to something we can explore further. So you are clear where you stand and you are clear where you're going. It's just the path may not be clear. But here I'm not clear with anything. So in Australian schools, so situated within a framework of new literacy theories, this paper reports findings from analysis of the ways these mandated documents, what mandated documents? Australian curriculum tells you what to do, right? May support proposed approaches, I don't know, may support teachers in the first years of school. Okay, so we've got some policies or approaches, or maybe I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. Maybe maybe I'm misreading it. Okay, in producing digital text. Now, friends, digital literacy is not about producing digital texts. If you see my point, digital literacy is basically on the one picture you see one thing, and in another picture you see the same story, but now present is a different picture. The same. So you basically can be the same picture, but the title represents that story differently. So you can see that. So it's about interpreting digital media, interpreting how information is presented through digital media, and all of that. It's not about just producing a digital text. It's about many things. It's like now Lala was saying, also integrating ChatGPT. I think I just saw on Facebook today Mr. McNoy. So he's the Director General of Higher Education in Cambodia. He had a little meme saying, ChatGPT is not your brain. It's not going to replace it. Use it as a tool. Now, most people do not know how to use. They don't experiment. I'm working with a lot of postgraduate students, and I'm showing them the simplest things that I used a year ago with ChatGPT as I started playing, and they're not even there yet. Right? And I think it's because they don't have methods of working all together. I think people don't have methods of working. We are so schooled to follow that we do not know how to think. So when we have a thinking machine or statistical machine that uses statistics to help us how to think, or to make us angry, and then we can actually articulate better what we think, right? So this is very often happening to Amy. She calls me and she says, ChatGPT just went stupid. Right, but that makes her write the paragraph better. And then ChatGPT all of a sudden revives, wakes up, because depending how you frame the question, or right, so ChatGPT will give you a different response. It's a good thing. So there's a lot of happening in the digital space. And to say that digital literacy is about producing digital text, that's kind of like where did we get, how did we get there? So when you write your proposal, be firm, be clear, don't be foggy, don't be flipping in your text. One moment it is digital technology, then it's digital literacy, and then it is producing digital text. Say what you mean, stick to it. Someone who reads your text, a supervisor, can clearly tell whether you know what you're talking about, right? And the more you are able to show that you know what you are talking about, the more attractive you are to a supervisor. I'm not going to say hundreds, but I get dozens upon dozens of submissions to me by students that they want to do PhD. They want to study with me. So I accept a lot, but I also know that there are limitations of the university because they can only fund so many students. So your degree matters, your grades matter, your publications prior to doing PhD matter, but also your proposal, just in order to make it sort of not just attractive to me, but also to help yourself as you read the literature in order to actually write up the 700 words. If you stick to digital literacy, then you put in your Google search or in your literature search, Google digital literacy. But if you define it, and then you find it in the curriculum, then you look for digital literacy approaches and so on. So you always have the same word. Here we are just all over the place. And then the abstract reads, and we then determine implications for teachers' responsiveness to these documents. The perspective is not clearly stated. I don't see the reason why I should read this paper. I will give it to my student probably, but I wouldn't read it. I'm somewhere else. Yeah, Emmy is looking at me like I hate you. Yeah, I'll give it to my students. I'm just not like, there's nothing here that gives me confidence that it's worth my time. I have a book to read that, it's exciting, difficult, but exciting. And I get, every time I read one sentence from this book, I get something out of it. Here it is doubtful. So, and I'm not saying the paper is bad, but the abstract is, right? So, one way to improve your abstracts, by the way, when you write take your discussion section and put it in ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to generate abstract for your paper based on your discussion section, and see what will come out. I'm not saying to copy and paste them to your paper when you want to submit it for reviewing. But read it, have a look what happens, right? Or maybe it will do better than you think. All right, so we don't know from what perspective you're going to look at it. Nothing was actually stated, so I'm not sure where this paper sits. Okay, so with the recent release of the Australian curriculum, now we're here, but back again to the Australian curriculum, which could have been right first paragraph and story finished. When you write about something, you just say it and you finish it. Don't come up. It's not a song which has a what is the thing called? But it gets repeated all the time. We call it refrain. Amy, you should press the unmute yourself. Chorus, right? It's like every second or third paragraph, it's back to the curriculum, right? Just say it in the beginning, tell us what we should know about it, and that's it. It's finished. Okay, so with the recent release of the curriculum, we argue for the pedagogical knowledge that teachers required to implement digital text production experiences within the mandates of the curriculum.
No.
Don't know what it means. They found the methodology for everybody.
Hello.
That's the problem with. We hear you, Andrew. So that's the problem with a lot of authors. They look for the only ultimate way for everyone to do things. Now, if I if I said that, you would say, "Hey, Anya, are you that good?" Or you would say to me, "Are you saying that in 100 years' time nobody can actually improve on you?" Why are they looking for the pedagogical knowledge that teachers require? I just don't understand. Even I don't even understand that sentence. And professional learning. We hear you, Andrew, all the time. Everything is working at your end. Don't worry. So the professional learning, you know what? Yeah. So professional learning, obviously. I mean, nobody can just pop into the class, and right. So this was my take on this abstract. When you write your proposal, avoid these mistakes, right? Identify the problem with teachers' interpretation of digital literacy. That would be interesting. Does it collide with that one of the Australian curriculum, or does it align with it? What have you read? Tell us more. Tell us about your hypothesis. Why do you think there's a collision? Why do you think maybe there are some other ways of doing things, right? So explain to us now and justify how you would want to actually go about and clarifying the tensions you identify. Right. So I hope that sort of this particular discussion of this particular abstract helps. Anybody wants to comment? Andrew, do you want to comment? When
Yeah,
students,
kind of. Um, First of all, I don't know if I'm still connected.
you
Connection's been
are.
going up and down. I'm using. Okay. So I wanted to say something a bit different, which is I think that the abstract and that proposals in general need to demonstrate to potential supervisors that you are in control of something. And when I say you're in control, it doesn't mean that you know everything, but that you have some kind of way of relating all the pieces to each other and that you know enough about other stuff to talk about. So it doesn't just seem, oh, this seems like a good idea. Seems like a good idea to check on three people having a conversation about the three bears story, you know. And we're just going to have a chat about it, and then we'll do a transcription of it, and we'll see what words people use, and uh, and then I'll ask my friend if they agree with me. That's not enough. And one of the things about proposals and theses is that you have to demonstrate that you are in control of the methodology. In
At
other
least a
words, you
little
can't
bit.
just say, "Oh, I cannot just say I will use mixed methods, or I will use quantitative approach, or I will use a qualitative approach." You need to show why you're doing that and sort of what methods you're going to use to do the analysis. So you're going to say sample size will be, 30 people, 500 people, 10,000 people, doesn't matter. It's a sample. Sample of what? What's the population that you're going to be working with? So that it's not just, the 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 students in Nakhon Ratchasima who live next to my house. Um, it's going to be it's going to have some generalizable value. In the end, when you do qualitative analysis, by the way, it seems to me that the purpose of doing qualitative analysis is very largely to set up the conditions so that you can do a quantitative analysis next, because you want generalizable results. You want to be able to say, okay, if you stimulate the right brain, most people will do that. And then the next step after that is, okay, we know that roughly stimulating the right brain helps people learn whatever it is, but now we can refine this for every student. So the way you stimulate every student's right brain will vary according to every student. So you do the statistics, you talk about generalizability, but then you tune and you tweak the results according to learners so that you don't become the slave of the statistics, which means, and the slave of the statistics means that you apply a one size fits all approach to learning.
So
And
these comments that you
that's
just
the
made,
real danger.
yeah, I'll let you talk more, but this comment you made, when you write your initial proposal, run it past ChatGPT. Use the comments Andrew just mentioned to pose questions. So turn them into questions to ChatGPT and ask, on the basis of what I just written in my proposal, how can I do that? Suggest me, how can I set up an experiment? How can I set up this connection between the qualitative and quantitative analysis, right? So we have tools, like I wish I had, 30, 40 years ago. We never had those. You have now, and it's all possible. Did you want to finish something? Because I quickly wanted to show one more. I've done more than that, but I just want to show definitely one more from this journal, one more paper.
Okay, yeah, well, it's enough for me.
Okay, so I don't know whether I have. Okay, so here it is. So this is investigating primary pre-service teachers' perceptions of non-fiction picture books. So Emmy might explain to us what are the non-fiction picture books, but you can imagine, I don't know, you browse through the pictures and it is about Australia or it is about ancient Egypt or something. Or it is about whatever. So I'm not allowed, judging by this paper, because I read the whole paper, to mention that they could be informative, because they said they didn't really say why. But anyway, what I wanted to say here in terms of proposal, you read this paper and it seems like a little bit more serious. It talks about factors contributing to the observation. Look how careful I am. I mean, we're all very careful in our panel. We're always careful in the way we use words. And I'm teaching my students, when I teach them, I never use the word because it just popped into my mouth. Everything is referenced, right? Every word I say, I can put a reference underneath it. So here, they've observed imbalance between using fiction, which is fables, stories, right, and non-fiction materials, and especially in non-fiction picture books. And basically, the whole research boils down to two things. The first one is teachers don't get enough training how to use non-fiction picture books. Non-training or not enough. They did give teachers 5 weeks of training, I think. 5 sessions of 5 weeks, doesn't matter. Didn't generate any results. I find it interesting. Right? Very interesting. You have 5 sessions with pre-service teachers, and that didn't generate the relevant change. Like, how many do you need? Like a year? And there's a reason. Because, and this is something when you write a proposal, think to yourself when you read this article, why? Because it's very easy to read through the article and you go like, okay, so they did have 5 sessions and they didn't do anything, and then they give you a reason why. Oh, because teachers always think in traditional terms, they can't understand really how to do things innovatively. Teachers are this, teachers are that, and some other study pointed out that teachers are always traditional, so it's their fault. So that was teachers. So what did I say? That the first fault was with not enough professional training, and also the fault was that teachers, even when they do get professional training, they don't get much out of it because they are just stuck. Okay. This is something that leaves us, we should pause here and think to ourselves, why is the finger always pointed at the teacher or a pre-service teacher? Why isn't if I teach for 5 sessions, my students this is like 5 weeks, right? My students would be at the boss of the university complaining, that woman, take her from this unit. She doesn't know what she's teaching. We're done with her. That's what would happen at my university if I had 5 sessions. Literally, I'd be out of that subject in no time, right? So I don't understand. So my students would have done it. What about that professional training they produce? Now, one thing is clearly to me, and this is a good hypothesis with which to. So when you have this thought that maybe it's not the pre-service teachers problem or in-service teachers problem. Maybe it's a training problem, right? And what could it be? These people in this article, they say there is fiction and non-fiction, almost as the two required different ways for dealing with them as a teacher, for integrating them into the learning program. I actually, because I knew I had this podcast today, I went to ChatGPT and said, I asked ChatGPT for, it was my friend, I called a friend and I asked ChatGPT to tell me whether I'm correct with the way I read it. And it said yes. So it indicates that there are different approaches for each. I don't know why. A good question to ask for a proposal. Why the heck are they saying that there are two different ways? Right, so where do they place the boundary? Different text, different genre, different methodology. So if you have 30 different genres, you have 30 different methodologies. I just don't know, and you may not know. Worth checking. So and why is it that even if they are different, require different methodologies? I don't believe it, but let's assume so. Why didn't they in that professional training create a meaningful link between the two for people to get it during session 1? What do they need? 7 sessions? What would be the magical number? And also in the paper, I have to say, I read it because I didn't want to make a fool out of myself. So I didn't read just the abstract, I read it. And nowhere did I see how these authors recommended in relation to any stuff that is cruising around in the discipline of literacy pedagogy, how they recommended to actually integrate it into a literacy program. I didn't see any pedagogical advice. Are they too scared because they are publishing and they want to be published and too scared to be committed to something? I don't know. So I didn't see it. So I didn't see why the two require different pedagogy, why the professional training couldn't relate the two, even if, let's assume they are different, why they couldn't relate them to make the teaching of nonfiction meaningful, right? So this is black and this is white. You can see how they contrast, right? So white is not as dark as the black is, right? You can see the difference. So, I mean, that's sort of in that sort of way. So what did I say? That, and also what ideas are there to draw on to make some suggestions. I couldn't see that. I couldn't see anything. Again, I couldn't touch anything. Nothing like, yes, that's what I did. That's what my doctoral students did. And that's what their students loved. I couldn't find anything. So again, non-committal. I don't think that we should go into the 21st century with such foggy concepts and papers and research. I think we should be committal. When you get married, you don't say, yeah, I might love you, I don't know. I will find out. I might wear the ring or not really. I'm not sure yet. Right? You say it. This is where I'm going. So yeah, so that's what I thought.
It doesn't change anything. So.
Right.
I mean, you may make the commitment, but in the end, it may make no difference to the outcome.
Right, but I'm not sure whether the law is in. Yeah, but I'm not sure whether in California they still have a blame policy. Anyway, so what I wanted to say is, when you read carefully and see what's in it for you. And I produced this analysis to give our potential students, prospective students, not just ideas, but confidence to put questions where people just put exclamation marks. 5 sessions we gave teachers and they didn't understand it. That's because they're traditional. Oh, look at that. That other study said they just think traditionally. They will never understand it. We are so good and they are so bad. Look, if your teachers are bad.
Well, can I just make a comment on that?
I'm done. I'm
I'm
finished.
preparing for two keynotes. I'm preparing for two keynotes in the next 2 weeks, which is kind of stressful. But one of the interesting things that I think is true when you look at, at the situation of language teaching in Asia is that we now have English as a lingua franca, which means that we are allowed to have a flexible notion of what English is. We have translanguaging, which means that we now have a flexible notion of what communicative language teaching should be like, so we can mix languages. Now, I don't have any objection with any of those things because that's how I learned my whatever languages I happen to speak. I also think that we try to motivate people more. We take on the responsibility of motivation. So we have cooking classes in English in our university or in other universities. I don't know if you think it's going to motivate people to learn English more, to be, to love English better. I tend to think of motivation as how do I force people who don't want to learn English and be happy about it? Um, we also have things like um, we worry about their anxiety levels. Are they really anxious? You poor thing. You have to learn English, and it makes you so anxious. My question is, okay, it would be better if they were happy rather than anxious, but does it actually have a real impact on the outcomes of their courses? Would we suddenly have a 50% increase in standards if we could break the if we could break this anxiety problem? Yes, meaning making is an emotional issue, but that's not this in the same box of emotions as anxiety and motivation. So, uh, and by the way, have you ever heard of any language department which that explains the and oh, sorry, we've done all of these things. We've unwhitened the curriculum. Don't know how exactly, but we made it more local because apparently the curriculum in Thailand is too white. And so we've done all of these things, and have we had any outcomes in terms of proficiency? And the answer is, for the last 11 years, the curve is flat in all of Southeast Asia. There have been no progress, significant progress in any country in Southeast Asia, in any of the ASEAN countries, except for the Philippines, which of course is almost native speaker, and Singapore, which is entirely native speaker. It's number one or two in the world now in terms of language. But one of the things that I have noticed is that there is not a single language department anywhere in the world that says it's their fault that the language standards have not gone up. Right? It's the students' fault. They're anxious, they're stressed, they're so okay. So let's do all of these things. Has that helped? Answer: no, it hasn't helped. Whose fault is it? Not the language departments, because we're really good.
Just ask
And
us.
I just find this amazing. There is never any, there is, there is never any acceptance by language departments that it's their problem. And one of the things I'm saying is it's time for a change, and the change cannot be in any of these other things that I've just talked about, because we've been doing them for 40 or 50 years. Anxiety studies are 40 years old. Motivation studies are at least 40 years old. Yes, Jean-Marc Devel is doing some stuff now about emotions. Okay, that's nice. Are these outcomes going to be changed because of this concern? And I hope they are, but I don't think they will. I hope, but I don't think they will. What I actually think is that we need a change in how we construct our language teaching. And that is the responsibility of language departments. Well, actually, I'm also saying that it's not the responsibility of language departments as linguistics departments. I'm saying it's the responsibility of language departments as education departments.
Yeah,
Linguistics has not
it's really
served language
problematic
well.
how
Linguistics has
people
not served
reduce.
language well sorry, language learning well. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Say it again.
I'm saying
Linguistics.
linguistics has not really served language learning particularly well.
It has reduced the
But
problem
it
to
is
grammar and
linguistics that,
vocabulary.
well, maybe something like that. But actually, one of the problems is that people come to language teaching because they love language, and the way that they love language is to do it through linguistics, which is the officially approved language science. And so we have a lot of stuff about language and not enough stuff about learning. And I think that it's now time to shift from language to learning this thing called language. Now, I'm not saying there is no connection between the two, but I am saying that the primary focus should be the learning side of things. And that becomes more broader and more multidisciplinary and looks at things like neuroscience and looks at things as broad as exercising. You know, if you there are studies which show that exercising after a certain number of hours of study of something will enable you to know that stuff better. And they've done some tests, and there are millions of research tests, research projects that we should be performing on little things like that we don't do, instead of worrying about are they using the correct preposition in the right place,
What do you mean by
which is a
exercising,
kind
Andrew?
of parody.
What do you mean by
Exercising. You go to the gym and you work on it.
at the same
There
time?
is a study, and
I
I
know,
can't
I know. I
remember
just
it
wanted
now,
to.
which says, yeah, exercise means you go on a treadmill or you do aerobic exercise after you've been studying, start something. There is a specific time window. If you do it within that time window, your brain will remember better or will know better, or somehow in a measurable way, you will be a better performer in the thing that you will learn.
Because you've increased your blood circulation in your brain, and that's what happened. Yeah, some studies were
I
also
guess so.
putting kids on the treadmill as they were doing mathematics, so on the computer screen, so you had both at the same time. I think doing it afterwards is probably better. Anyway, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Lala. It was a great session. I think from our perspective we did our best, as always. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you, everyone.
in 2 weeks, we will be streaming Andrew's and mine keynotes. So we will not have a podcast. We will be streaming our keynotes. And then a week later, we will be streaming a workshop on reading for emotion, which is a method based on neuroscience. And also semiotics, right? So it is not like how, when you read a book, how does it make you feel? No, none of that. It's not about anxiety. It's very complex and beautiful and easy. And now and then I have bursts of emotions and I post analysis of my model on my Facebook. So today I posted something so you can have a look at it. So that will be 24th of August. We'll stream it from Darwin. All right.
Darwin. All right.
See you
Thank
then on
you.
those during those sessions. Okay, bye.
Bye
Thank you.
bye. Bye.
Bye, Amy.